Hey guys, Drifter here. Welcome to Black Ops Cold War in Depth. In today's episode, we're going to be going over the weapon tuning patch notes that just dropped last evening. It's a pretty massive weapon balancing patch that changes almost every weapon category in the game. However, they mostly focused on recoil changes and SMG changes today, but the Krig got a rework, we got some reworks to rocket launchers, stances, and just quite a few things to go over. So we're going to start off with the KSP because the buffs that were made to the KSP might actually make it the new best gun in the game, as you saw in the thumbnail, or at least a lot stronger than it was before. And if you guys want to support me at all, you can use the creator code DRIFTOR, which has to be all caps and the O is a 0 in the store if you're going to buy anything from the Battle Pass or skins or whatever, which does make this video sponsored by Activision. But yeah, use my creator code if you want to. So let's talk about these KSP 45 buffs. The first important buff is that the bullet speed has been increased by 32.5%, so basically 1/3 more bullet speed, and it got a 20% reduction in its burst delay, so now it shoots more frequently and the bullets travel faster. This is very important because the KSP's biggest weakness was slow muzzle velocity, meaning that it just kind of hit slower. You had extra frames between when you shot and when you hit the target, almost making it feel like lag, and it was difficult to lead at long ranges. Well, we are significantly improving that now. The KSP was already kind of a strong weapon despite being kind of awkward. I mean, it was GA'd and competitive. There's, people that could make really good use of it and others couldn't, and it was really strong because it would deal 50 damage a shot and guarantee a 1 burst if all of your shots hit up to a pretty good range, albeit at a cost of just having a horrible muzzle velocity and kind of awkward burst. But the weaknesses that it had of the muzzle velocity and the burst delay were both buffed. So the only downsides to the weapon got improved, and now it's significantly better. I do think that the KSP is still an awkward weapon, no doubt, because of the burst fire and because of just how it handles and how the recoil works. It's not as easy as the spray and pray gun, but I think it's a force to be reckoned with, and I think you're going to get to see a lot more people using the KSP 45 in the future. The Milano 821 got some buffs and nerfs and a kind of general rework to move it in a different direction. It now has an increase in mid-range damage, which will reduce your shots to kill, and it also has an increase in the range of that mid-range range. So this is effectively a buff to shots to kill and overall range of the weapon, which was quite good seeing as how it was a low recoil SMG. But they decided to nerf the sprint out speed and make some minor changes to the raise time and ADS time so it's not quite as fast handling, pushing this one more into the AK-74U or LC-10 type of weapon where it's a long range accuracy SMG. To me, this is very confusing. I think it hurts the Milano because the Milano doesn't have very good time to kill, but what it did have was a really tight hipfire spread, so you could run some really fun like rushing hipfire classes with it. I think it kind of takes away from that specialty of the weapon, and I'm curious as to why they wouldn't decide to maybe buff sprint out time, buff hipfire, and make it sort of a slow time to kill but hipfire viable weapon instead of pushing it into a weapon category where we already have 2 or 3 strong competitors. The AK-74U got a couple of nerfs. It now kicks more after prolonged firing. So there's a couple of different, we have predictive recoil now. There's a couple, you'll notice that your first shots have a pattern and then your next 10 and then your next 10. If you really hold down the trigger for spray and pray on the AK-74U now, about the last half of your magazine is going to be a lot less accurate than it used to be. The AK-74U also got a 23% bullet speed nerf, which kind of hurts because it had the best bullet speed in the entire SMG class. It was realistic because it uses a different type of cartridge, and just generally good overall. However, it was a very strong weapon. It was very easy to use. The recoil was low. The bullet's velocity was great. So in my opinion, these nerfs probably make the AK-74U more fair, and they pull it back in line with the other weapons. So I'm going to say that's a good thing. The LC-10 got a massive nerf. Not only did the mid-range damage itself get reduced a little bit, but the actual range on that max damage got reduced by 41%, which is just, it's huge. It's, oh god. So the LC-10 was like this long-range laser beam MSMC kind of weapon, and I think it was just doing too good and overperforming compared to the assault rifle. So this one got a massive nerf. I have a feeling that people aren't going to like this very much, and I have a feeling that the LC-10 is going to start seeing a lot less use after this nerf, which kind of stinks. The MAC-10 has been nerfed to now have more horizontal recoil, which it probably needed, to be honest. It has a super fast time to kill, it shoots really fast, it's easy to use, so they're going to make it kick more, and I think that's a good balancing patch. If you do a traditional wall test, comparing the old Milano and the new Milano, where you shoot the wall and just check out the recoil, the problem is that the gun has so much vertical recoil that it kicks up to the ceiling and you can't really tell or compare anything. So the best I can do is use the new Milano and shoot it. It's in ultra low recoil mode as best I could get it, and try and hold it down so it doesn't move vertically. And when I do that, you can really get an idea of the horizontal spread and how far left and right it's going to kick now. It seems to drift to the right and then to the left and then back to the right, somewhat predictably in a zigzag pattern. So if you're pulling down, you'll just kind of make a little horizontal bar. It is not the only weapon that had its recoil changed. Quite a lot of that today. The Krig 6 got an entirely new recoil pattern. They just decided to rework this one from the ground up. For those of you that don't remember, the old Krig 6 recoil pattern was about the first half of your shots would be pretty predictable, and I think it went slightly up and to the left, and then it would hit this hard arc to the right and almost make a C shape or like a T shape or something like that, like writing the letter R perhaps. And it was very bizarre for a weapon that was considered to be a low recoil, like accurate, predictable kind of weapon. So the new recoil pattern effectively continues what the first half of the old one doing, and it's mostly vertical, and the arc back to the right is far less intense. I think it makes a lot more sense for this type of weapon and how it's supposed to be used. And the new recoil pattern is, in my opinion, just like objectively better, thus a buff. It's more, not only is it more precise, but it's also more overall accurate to the target that you're going to be aiming at, and it's going to be a lot easier to control. So I think almost everybody that uses the Krig will consider this to be a significant buff to the weapon. It got changes to its muzzle flash, iron sights, and even optical attachments that focused on clarity, though overall I don't think that those are going to matter a whole lot. I didn't have a problem with the old way it was set up and the muzzle flash and all that, so I don't think I'm going to have a problem with the new attachments either, but it is still a buff to the weapon if all of the stuff is just a little bit more clear, and the idea was that it makes it feel a little bit less floaty. After that, recoil changing attachments got reworks for both assault rifles and submachine guns, but only the recoil changing attachments, and not even all of them. So we're basically talking about muzzles and grips here, and specifically ones that modified recoil, and in this case it seems to be a heavy focus on horizontal recoil. In general, they were minor changes. If you go and look at the new attachments versus the old, you'll like plus or minus 1%, plus or minus 2%, plus or minus 3%. Little changes one side or the other. However, they are weapon specific. So there are weapons that used to be, plus 12%, now it's plus 25%, or it used to be minus 15 and now it's minus 10. There are a few outliers out there where some attachments on some weapons got significantly better or worse, and that probably is just going in line with the overall way that the developers want to use them and the specific buffs and nerfs to those weapons like the AK-74U. But in general, the changes aren't too significant. I'm just going to show some on the screen here so you can kind of see the changes. For the most part, I don't think many of you are going to notice these on your classes, though what this does do is it can actually create new optimal setups on some weapons. There are some weapons where the standard best low recoil setup is no longer standard and you might need to change one or two things. And I think that's a good thing. It also has a bigger focus on controlling or mitigating horizontal recoil and reducing vertical recoil, increasing vertical recoil. So in general, the guns are going to have a little bit more vertical kick now, so you don't get like your negative recoil AK-47. And you also have more options for keeping the horizontal recoil from going crazy if you're only running one attachment. Here are some recoil plots side by side of the assault rifles and SMGs, and I basically kitted these with the minimum possible recoil under the old attachments and then the minimum possible recoil under the new attachments, which is how most people use these weapons. So if you want to compare side by side how your kits are going to change, they'll basically look like this. And in the case of assault rifles, not much changes. SMGs, maybe a little bit. Overall, not a crazy big difference. There were a few other little nerfs and buffs here and there. Stoner 63 got a negative 25% range nerf. I don't think this was the problem with the Stoner. The problem with the Stoner was that it's incredibly accurate and it kills people quickly. It already had great range, so I don't think this is going to hurt it a whole lot. Stoner's still going to be incredibly strong and annoying. The sniper rifle glint bug was fixed, so snipers no longer have glint for iron sights, which is both a buff and a bug fix at the same time. Moving along, Magnum Akimbo hipfire accuracy was nerfed. So the hipfire box itself did not get bigger, but we're going to do a little compare and contrast, and you can see that the old hipfire, even though it's within the box, is still pretty tight and actually pretty close to the center. The new hipfire, after it's been nerfed, is significantly less predictable and more sideways and crazy, so the hipfire is behaving more like it kind of should given the size of the box, and it is a nerf. It does make them less reliable and thus makes them a lot less cheesy to deal with if you're playing in a game. The RPG-7 got a pretty big buff. It now flies way more straight. You can see the footage of me shooting the old RPG-7, just kind of spraying, and you'll see that it doesn't go very far before it just goes crazy sideways or up or down or in some direction. I'm shooting at rocks mostly and missing all of my targets. However, the new RPG-7, at least at these ranges, which is the only ranges I'd want to use it at, is more like a sniper. It flies pretty much straight all the way and hits anything, so you have a lot more useful range on your RPG. On top of that, rocket launchers in general now deal more damage against people with flak jacket and hardcore, and I did not test this, but it is supposed to give you an opportunity to get more one-shot kills, and I'm assuming it won't take very long before Reddit lets the Treyarch know if this happened or not. There was a very slight reduction to stance change speeds. I measured this and could not tell a very big difference at all. I don't think that many of you are going to notice, so I wouldn't worry about it a whole lot. That's all for the weapon tuning changes. In my opinion, most of these are good changes. I don't really agree with the changes to the LC-10 or the Milano, but most of the weapons, it made a lot more sense. I can kind of see what they want to do with the recoil to give us more options in kitting our weapons, and I can see what they want to do. They want to make the Krig a little better, they want to make the MAC-10 a little worse. That's, you know, totally okay with me. The KSP buff was surprising given how dangerous that weapon can be and how it's almost borderline overpowered already. We'll see how that pans out in the hands of people in public matches. And of course, there was a ton of new content today. We have a hardpoint multi-team, we have Miami Strike being added, we have new gunfight maps being added, there's new operators, new skins, a lot of new stuff that I'll probably cover later in the week. Today's video was just for patch notes. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.